Hi everyone, it's Gabrielle here. I thought I would say hello in person, well, on video. It's been a while since I've done a video, and just coming back to show you a technique of overpainting. So where you do the jelly print and then overpaint over the top to fill in the negative spaces and create a picture. So this is the one that I'm going to show you how to do. There's two birds with leaves. Anyway, so I'll get started. Thank you. So here's the materials that I used. You can pause and have a good look at the paints if you wanted to try and get the same ones, but really you don't need any special paints. You can use anything that you already have. What I'm doing here is creating the base layer. So I'm putting down a layer of Payne's Grey and Aquamarine Blue. Again, just two different colours to try and get a bit of variation in the tone. I'm brayering that on, and really this is going to be the dark tones in my picture. What I'm doing now is taking off some of that dark using kind of a variety of mark making textures and things. So the bubble wrap, I've got some stamps here from, I think they came from a children's kind of art set. I love that little concentric dotty stamp, and also there's sort of some random dots. Just again coming in, trying to create a bit of a kind of repeating pattern, but really what I'm doing here is trying to create gaps of white where colour can show through underneath. These little wooden things, I think they're from scrapbooking materials, so they're also really good for textures and taking off the tone here. What I was thinking about here is that I'm going to be putting kind of leaf shapes diagonally, and of course, when they're printed, they'll actually be reversed. So I'm just thinking where the leaf shapes will be and trying to add some kind of leaf shapes that might end up being where the leaves are, but it's all a bit random. And then I came back in and took more colour off because I was just thinking it was getting a bit dark. Now what I'm doing is coming back with just a tiny bit of different kind of warm coloured acrylic paints, and I'm using a makeup sponge here just to dab those on in different places. And you can be pretty free and easy with this, because although it looks like it's kind of covering up all your wonderful textures and patterns, and it looks like we're kind of making a bit of a mess, it's okay, because actually this is the underneath layer, and all those beautiful patterns will be kind of crisp and clear on top. Obviously you have to wait till that underlayer is dry before you do this bit, otherwise it will be a smudgy mess. I'm laying down some kind of yellows and golds, roughly where I think the leaves will be, and reds where the birds will be. And now I'm laying down a white layer, just really to take off that whole layer. I'm using sort of the Kmart Anko acrylic, but any cheap watery white is good. You can see I've masked around the edges of my paper. I'm using A3 card. I think it was a watercolour paper that I used here, but you can really use any kind of smooth card works well. This was like a hot press watercolour paper, but I've had good results with a whole range of different types of paper. You can see there's a little bit where it didn't quite print, but it doesn't matter, joyfully, for this thing, because we're actually going to be painting over that. So the fact that there's a couple of gaps that stuck, it's actually a really good way to repurpose prints that are kind of beautiful, but there were bits that didn't quite work. So, it might be good if you've got a stash of old prints. Sometimes it can be hard to know what to do with all our jelly prints we create. And this is a really good way to kind of make them even more special. What I'm doing here, I've got some paper that I've just cut out these rough shapes out of copy paper. And now I'm tracing around them with a turquoise Posca pen. It's good to actually use a kind of pen that might tone in with whatever colour paint you're going to use eventually. Otherwise, it might show up later. So I'm just fixing that up again. I just really made up this design, and I'll link it in the under the video, just if you wanted to try and use the same design. But it's also, it's really fun just to invent your own if you have any. It's good. I think this kind of technique, this overpainting technique, works really well with shapes that are quite distinct and easily, kind of recognized for what they are. You don't want anything that's too subtle, because you're kind of really looking at silhouettes. And so birds are great because we all kind of know what birds look like, leaves, shadow, rabbits. I can imagine anything with quite a distinct shape is going to be great. So what I'm doing here, I've got some Liquitex acrylic paint here, just a nice opaque paint for this layer. And I'm using a combination of like a turquoise and then a teal colour, going around, just really going around and painting over. It's that simple, isn't it? It's that negative space painting. when I'm doing this, I'm leaving a few little kind of bits of the background showing, particularly at the bottom, just because I thought that added a bit of texture and interest. The other way you could do this, so overpainting gives you a lot of control. You can vary the colours. It kind of gets that painterly texture, but you could also use those paper shapes and just actually print over the top of them, and then they would be masks, and that would be a lot quicker. So if you wanted to do a whole lot, that might be a quick way to do it. I quite like the freedom that the painting gives you and the control and I guess you can also have that, freedom that if, as you're going, you suddenly think, oh, I need a bit more of a leaf here or a flower there. You can kind of just add as you go and kind of change it on the spot, which I kind of like that combination of painting and printing. I think works really well. So just adding a little bit more of the turquoise in the top, just to give a bit more variation. Again, just aiming for a bit more variation and interest there. And also just going around the edges to make sure that I don't have any kind of gaps, that it's all the way up to the masking tape. So it will be a really nice clean line when I take the tape off. Now what I'm doing is coming in with some acrylic inks. You don't have to use acrylic inks. I just had some that I was playing with, so I used those. You could also just use watered down ordinary acrylics that are, provided they're not too opaque. That would work really well as well. You could water them down with water or with matte medium. What I'm doing here, you could have also just gone with the kind of all the same colours. I just thought that I would like to change the colours up a bit. Now that I saw it, just wanting to differentiate, I guess, the birds and the leaves a bit more. So putting some greens and blues into the leaves so that they're kind of, you can recognise them as different shapes from the birds, and maybe make the birds stand out a bit more. So the birds and the flowers, I'm doing kind of in more reds and purples. So the flowers, and just dabbing. If you go a bit crazy with the inks, it's easy to fix just by dabbing before it's dry. You can really just play around until it's kind of, the way you like it. As long as you just keep that layer fairly light and translucent. It would just be a shame if you kind of painted too heavily over the top of the pattern, then you would lose some of that detail that is so pretty. And so you can see I've just come in and given a little bit more detail to the birds and the wings, and it's really just the way you want it at this point. And now what I'm doing is coming in with a Posca pen to do some little eyes and wing details. You could also do this with a fine paintbrush and your acrylic paints again. There's just something kind of quite, feels a bit safer and easier to do it with a pen, doesn't it, sometimes than the brush, but it's really just your preference. I know some people do the most amazing kind of details over the top with fine Posca pens, and you could really go crazy and do that here too. You could do a whole lot of veins in the leaves, you could do feathers, beaks, whatever takes your fancy. I've just kept it pretty simple here and used kind of dots on the wings rather than lines. Now, I love this part, taking off the tape. It's really fun. Obviously, this is quite speeded up. Really, you would do this quite carefully and slowly. But you can see all the detail. I love that kind of contrast of the detail of the print versus the kind of opaque painting. It's a really nice kind of effect, I think. And there's so many things you can do with this. I feel like I've just started and there's lots and lots of possibilities. So thank you for watching. I'd love to see what you do with this. Please have fun and enjoy. Thank you. Bye.